As you guys probably know, the Raimi Spider-Man flicks are my favorite Spider-Man movies. Now, I love Garfield and I love Holland as much as the next guy, but there's something special about watching Tobey Maguire suit up as a classic wall crawler and swing around town that I just can't get enough of. Maybe it's because that was the first time we saw a believable version of Spidey on the big screen, or maybe because Tobey takes the responsibility of being a superhero so sincerely. I can't really explain why, but I just love those movies. Well, today I thought it'd be fun to take a closer look at them and find some of the biggest mistakes. Try to find the shots when a production crew was accidentally in frame or when the continuity was broken. Now, when I revisited the films, I was actually pretty surprised. I was able to find quite a few. 1. The Reappearing Lamp from the first Spider-Man in 2002. When Peter Parker first got his powers in the film, he spent an evening blasting web fluid all over his room. At one point, he latched onto his tableside lamp and flung it into the wall. It shattered and fell to the floor, but a few quick shots later, the lamp magically reappeared intact. The simplest explanation for this error is probably the most likely. When they shot the later scene, they just forgot to remove the lamp from the table. Or they shot the conversation with Aunt May first and the broken lamp scene later. 2. Again, when Peter first gets his powers, we see him experiment with all of them, and in one particular scene, we see him give wall crawling a try. But something always felt a bit off about Tobey Maguire when he was scaling the side of this building. If you pay close attention, it seems like his back is actually bent a bit forward and that his clothes are dangling from around his belly, which is a clear giveaway that he isn't vertically ascending a wall on a wire, but actually just walking on his hands and feet horizontally on the ground. Now, if we turn our attention to Spider-Man 2, we'll find a lot more mistakes. 3. When Spidey is on his way to Mary Jane's play, a police cruiser gets smashed up in a pretty bad accident. But if you look closely at the driver of the car, you can clearly see that it isn't a cop. Instead of a New York City police officer in the driver's seat, we can easily see a stuntman wearing a full-face black motorcycle helmet. 4. At a different part of the movie, we see a similar stunt equipment mistake. When Peter Parker was without his powers, he was walking around the streets of New York, and after reading a particularly interesting issue of the Daily Bugle, which seemed to be begging for the return of Spider-Man, Peter noticed that a fire had started across the street. A young girl was trapped in a closet inside, and even though he was just a normal guy at this point, Peter Parker decided to run in and save her. At one point, we can clearly see that the girl is wearing knee pads under her clothing to protect herself from the rough set. Now, when we move on to Spider-Man 3, we can find some more really fun mistakes. 5. Actually, the entire scene of Sandman robbing the armored truck is basically one big continuity error, because in the background, you can clearly see several city landmarks from Cleveland, Ohio passing by, but as we all know, Spidey is a New York City-based superhero, so these random buildings from Ohio don't really make sense. 6. Spider-Man suit logo. Whenever Spidey's suit is shown underneath his shirt, whether it's the classic blue and red or the symbiote suit, the Spider-Man emblem is always shown to be really high near the collar of Peter's shirt. But when he takes off his clothes and actually suits up as Spider-Man, the emblem is much farther down near the chest. This was obviously a creative decision in order to emphasize the struggle of Peter's dual identities, but it's also a pretty nagging issue when you're a nitpicking fanboy like me.